Good Sunday morning. President Donald Trump preparing to give his first speech to Congress this Tuesday night as the White House puts the finishing touches right now on a revised travel ban. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. New executive action on travel restrictions could come as soon as tomorrow. So how will this version differ from the president's original order? Plus, a crackdown on illegal immigration now underway. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Michael McCaul just back from a trip to the border. He'll join me live. And ahead of the president's address to Congress Tuesday night, some Democrats say they are inviting immigrant guests to send a message. Democratic Congressman Jim Langevin is here to explain who he's invited to sit with him Tuesday night and why. Then tax reform will be a big part of that speech. New Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin calls it the #1 priority. My Sunday exclusive interview with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin this morning as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. President Trump is getting ready for his debut address before Congress on Tuesday night while his team finishes up a new immigrant travel ban. We could see that revised executive order as soon as tomorrow after the court struck down Mr. Trump's first order multiple times. The new version is expected to target immigrants from the same 7 predominantly Muslim countries without singling out refugees or green card holders. Meanwhile, the president took a hard stance on deporting illegal criminals last week, calling it, quote, a military operation. That was a day after a group of lawmakers toured the southern border, including the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, who later announced a task force to focus on terrorists. He joins me right now, Congressman Michael McCaul, Republican from Texas. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning, Maria.
I want to get into your trip to the border, certainly, and get a sense of what you saw. But first, let's talk about this executive order that we're expecting tomorrow. What are you expecting, and how might it look different from what we saw initially?
I think what they're going to do is tailor it to conform with what the courts came down with. I think the problem was in the implementation, not the policy of the executive order, and that was denying lawful permanent residents who have green cards the ability to come back into the United States. And I think that's what caused a lot of the chaos after the executive order was issued in the implementation of it. With respect to the 7 countries, they came from the visa waiver security bill I passed out of my committee. 3 of those countries were added by the Obama administration, and that comprises the 7 countries. That was signed into law by then President Obama. So I think the policy of trying to put a pause on people coming in from these high-threat areas and have higher vetting is entirely appropriate. I think it's more the implementation and denying people with lawful status back into the country.
So what do you say to those House Democrats who say, look, we're going to be at the president's speech on Tuesday night, and we're going to bring guests that put a face on the immigration story. We're going to be speaking in just a few minutes with Congressman Langevin, and he's bringing a Pakistani Muslim American born in Pakistan as his guest. We're going to talk with him shortly, and he says, look, I want the president to understand who's impacted. Do you believe that that's a fair portrayal of who's impacted?
Well, look, it's a democracy that people can make statements and try to put a human face on things, but, you know, I put a human face on the black widow from Pakistan in San Bernardino who killed so many people in California, to Rohami, the New York bomber, who we allowed back into the United States when he traveled to Afghanistan and Pakistan to some very, pretty radicalized mosques. So I can put a face on that as well. I think what we're looking at is what Giuliani and I worked on, and that is sort of a more high vetting process to high-threat areas. I think from a policy standpoint, most people would agree that we need to have better vetting. We don't do that right in the media of the father when he's let back into the country. So, look, there are 2 sides of the story, and I'll err on the side of protecting the American people.
Let me ask you, Congressman, about your trip, because you, along with House Speaker Paul Ryan and that delegation of House lawmakers, went to the southern border and toured the Rio Grande Valley to observe border security operations. We've got some pictures here of you at the border. Tell us what you saw.
Well, we flew by Black Hawk on horses on the ground and patrol boats in the river, and we saw, how wide open the Rio Grande Valley sector is in my home state, where most of the illegal crossings take place. More importantly, we got an intelligence briefing down there, the speaker and myself, about the threats south of the border from the drug cartels and potential terrorists. human trafficking, drug trafficking, violence, and corruption coming into the United States. That's why the completion of the wall is necessary to keep these threats out of the United States. And the Trump administration is moving very quickly. In fact, a request for proposals were just sent out by the department, and responses will come back probably next month in terms of how are we going to construct this wall, what is it going to look like. It's important to note that it will be comprised of not just physical barriers and infrastructure, but also technology, aviation assets, and personnel on the ground.
Yeah, you make a great point, because I know that you met with local leaders to try to figure out the challenges that they face as they are right there in the thick of things at the tip of the border. What did they say about the vetting process, about the challenges that they face in terms of securing that border?
Well, we worry about what we call special interest aliens that come from areas of high threat regions, and some we have apprehended at the border. But in terms of construction of the wall and the physical barrier, one thing we found that was very creative was the idea you can construct a concrete levee system on the river, because the river's a tough, more of a challenge for us. But this concrete levee provides protection from floods for the local residents, and yet also provides a concrete barrier for illegals and drug cartels to cross into the United States. We thought this was a really good sort of takeaway. And finally, Maria, I just say the morale of the Border Patrol I've never seen higher than it is right now, because they know that there's a political will in Washington to get this done, and the president has their back and is very, very supportive of their mission. I can't stress that enough.
So as a congressman representing really a border state, and you being in touch with those people on the front lines, what do you want the so-called extreme vetting to look like then, Congressman?
Well, when we say that, and I have a task force that's going to report to the president on how we can close off terror pathways into the United States, it really goes back to the Giuliani, McCall, Mukasey memo, where we basically said you can't ban because we don't think that would be constitutional based on race and religion. Rather, you should look at increasing the vetting process from high-threat areas. What does that look like? Looking at the FBI, which was not done well in the Rahami New York bomber case. And it's really a combination of a lot of factors. But right now we're letting people in. And, no employer would hire someone without looking at their social media. And yet we're letting people in the United States without even doing that most basic fundamental search.
Wow. That's incredible. Congressman, good to talk with you, and thanks so much for your service. We appreciate you coming back with this report from the border. We'll see you soon, sir.
Well, thank you so much, Maria.
Congressman Michael McCall joining us there. Meanwhile, President Trump is expected to talk about tax reform in his speech to Congress on Tuesday night. So what will get done?